let's talk a little bit more about reconciliation. Now, I know you're probably thinking, like, Brittany, you've like dedicated whole episodes to reconciliation. The last segment was just about the budget and the budget resolution, and then you talked about reconciliation. What in the heck else could you possibly have to say about reconciliation? Well, if you really want to go there, we can't talk about reconciliation without talking about, and I promise you, this is something that I, haven't talked about really. But there's been kind of, you've probably been hearing it on the news and, other media sources that you may be subscribed to, listening to, watching, whatever the case might be, telebeaming. You've probably been hearing about this move to increase the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. How in the heck are the two connected? What in the world does that have to do with budget reconciliation, right? Well, the simple answer to that is that some people want it to be included in the final COVID relief bill. And the people of some also includes the president. He wants it to be included, but he says that the Senate rules for the budget, as it relates to reconciliation, would actually prevent the increase from going forward. And in doing so, it would ultimately either halt or delay the next round of COVID relief, which if you know anything about his ambitious plans, for the first 100 days of his administration, let alone the addressing of the COVID pandemic crisis, that anything that, would halt or delay, either of those two things would be like a major, right? Let me tell you where I personally fall on this. Do I think that the federal minimum wage as it currently stands is acceptable? No. Do I think that the federal minimum wage should be increased? Yes. Do I think it should be increased to at least $15 per hour, regardless of one's location? Yes. Do I think that it should happen during the Biden administration? Absolutely. Do I think that raising the federal minimum wage to $15 per hour is something that should be done right now, tied to our next round of COVID relief? Absolutely not. What? Yes. Let me tell you. And again, this is not the official, stand of our organization. This is Brittany's personal opinion. Again, all of those things remain true, right? I think that it needs to go up. I think it needs to go up soon. I just don't think right now, not because I don't think it's a problem, but because at this time where businesses are barely surviving, not all, you have, and I'm not naive, I know that there are whole businesses and whole industries that have made record profits at this time, right? The pandemic has been pretty pleasing and forgiving to them, unlike the rest of Americans. I do think that is not the case for a majority of businesses here in the United States. I do not think that you can operate in a way that will please everybody. That includes people, and it also extends to businesses, right? Businesses are not all on the same page. They're not on the same industry. They don't all have the same goals. They don't all have the same resources, so on and so forth. So there are going to be some winners and there are going to be some losers. But I do think the majority is what needs to be of more paramount importance when kind of considering problems and solutions. That said, a majority of businesses are struggling. A majority of businesses cannot afford, they can't even operate in this sense, because a lot of places are still under lockdowns, or the lockdowns have been lifted. They have some sort of capacity limitations or something of the sort, or even if they're still fully functional, their customers, right, an important part of the equation, something we've talked about many times in this capitalistic society, in the society in which we live. You cannot separate the business from the consumer. They are intertwined in ways that go beyond just helping one without helping the other. But that said, businesses cannot, a majority, not all, some can go up to $15 an hour. Now, mind you, I'm not going to get into the conversation about automation like we've seen, for instance, with fast food industries, right? Where they can just, hey, you want to raise the standards, we want to raise the wages that we have to pay, that's fine. We'll just kick out our cashiers and take on, robots. I'm not getting into that argument. I'm simply saying most businesses, regardless of if automation is a part of their game, long-term or short-term, most businesses in this current environment cannot withstand wage hikes. We work with a bunch of independent contractors. I can tell you now, if they were employees and at this time, if wages went up, we couldn't do it. This would be the last you'd ever hear from me. Matter of fact, you probably would have never heard from me, right? Right? I'm just being honest here. But again, yes, there are businesses. There are businesses that can afford to pay $30 an hour. Hell, some can pay $50 an hour, and it still wouldn't. Hey, it wouldn't mean a thing, right? But that's not the case for a majority of Americans. So, speaking to this and then moving on from this point, personally, I do think that once we get at least consumers to a better position where they are more participatory in our economy on a large scale, and they're able to do it in a way that doesn't require as much assistance from the federal government as it does right now, absolutely take the federal minimum wage up. But what will happen if we, as is currently the plan, what will happen, in my opinion, if we have the $15 minimum wage attached to the next stimulus package and it passes, even though the federal minimum wage is set to kind of incline up, transition upwards until 2025 when it hits that mark, it's not going to, as soon as it passes, mandate everyone makes $15 an hour. It's not going to work like that. But if you know how businesses work, and this is why I put more responsibility, before I say this, I put more responsibility. You have a lot of politicians who say, American families should have planned for the pandemic. Personal responsibility. You want to tell the single mom with 2, 3, 4, 5, her business ain't none of my business, right? However many kids she has, you want to tell her she should have planned for a pandemic. But businesses, and you can't help her, mind you, you don't even want to give her $600. But then it comes to the business, they have business plans, forecasts, they should be having risk assessments, all this other stuff that standard businesses have, but you want to bail them out, no problem. Anyways, I say all that because businesses operate in a different way. And because they operate in a different way, even though this if it passes, this federal minimum wage implementation of $15 an hour, even though it won't be until 2025, businesses are not going to wait till 2025 to start planning for it to happen. They may act like they just didn't plan for any sort of catastrophe or loss in revenue. Even if I'll say that a majority of businesses, ours included, didn't plan for a pandemic, but you should have at least prepared for some sort of loss in revenue. Like, you seriously thought it was just going to go up and up, and like the experience in business in and of itself should show you it's not a steady incline, right? Who does that? Who believes that? What kind of stuff are you smoking? But businesses are not going to wait until 2025. The larger the business, you would think, well, they can handle this. They're going to be the first ones to immediately slash jobs. Let me, we talk about how the American productivity has just gone up, right? And we always talk about that in relation to federal minimum wage, right? Worker productivity is going up. Why haven't wages? Do you know why productivity is going up? Because people are having to do more and more and more and more and more because other people are getting fired. And we're going to continue to perpetuate that if we allow $15 as a minimum wage to be tacked on to this COVID relief package, even though it won't start until 2025. Now, on the other side of this, the argument made by a politician, if you don't know, you've been under a rock, Bernie Sanders, the argument made by him and other people is that, if you have a higher wage, it would reduce the amount of federal assistance for low-income individuals, and it would increase their taxable income. And not only, does this mean that it would ultimately help the economy, and so it's actually good to do it at this time because of that, but then we can actually justify tacking it on to the COVID relief bill because it would meet the Senate parliamentarians' requirement that any reconciliation measure have an effect on the federal budget. So then I ask the question, where are we today? Well, for starters, the House is expected to vote on a stimulus package at some point this week. Let me make something clear again. The House is voting on a stimulus package because I know a lot of you are well educated and you understand how a bill becomes a law. And so you know that it takes the House and the Senate. And you probably heard me earlier say that the Senate passed something and it went to the House. The Senate passed reconciliation. They didn't actually pass the stimulus bill. So even if the House votes on it this week, it still has to go to the Senate. Things that have to do with the budget have to originate. They can't, by the Constitution, they can't originate in the Senate. They have to originate in the House. Think of it like this. The Senate passed the rules, but then after they pass the rules, it's the House that hits go and makes the action happen for things related to the budget. Okay? So what's actually in this package, this stimulus package? Because for the longest time, we didn't actually have a package. We had a plan that was kind of written down on a sticky note and, pinned on, Biden's wall at the White House. No, I'm just totally joking, but it wasn't anything concrete. Like I said, this is now something that's concrete. As of, I believe, the 19th, we have like the actual bill, the bill, like, right? It is the bill that's in Capitol Hill. It's not, or on Capitol. How does this sing? I'm just a bill. Anyways, it was so long ago, right? Do the kids even still listen to that? So anyhow, we have the text. We know it's in the package. What's in there is the increase in the federal minimum wage. Well, let me say that again. What's in there is The increase in the federal minimum wage, direct checks for Americans, only for Americans that make $75,000 a year or less. There is an extension of the unemployment benefits, and it also takes the federal program that they have, the additional money from $300 to $400 per week. Then there's also money for small businesses. I've been rambling on long enough, not just in this segment, but in this episode. So let me tie all of this in together and let me say something and close. I have to make this very important point. I'd be doing you a disservice. I'd be doing myself a disservice because I would have wasted all this time rambling for no good reason, no good earthly reason, right? If I don't make this clear. Because, as I just told you, the federal minimum wage increase to $15 an hour was included in the bill that we now have that will be voted on. The reality is, we do not know if a Senate parliamentarian, or the Senate parliamentarian rather, is going to allow the Senate rules to essentially work in this instance. We don't know if budget reconciliation is going to prevent this bill from going forward. Reconciliation is what we're using. That was set in stone by the Senate. Now the House hit go and they're supposed to vote on it and kick it back to the Senate, but the Senate has to say again, does this meet our rules? And remember, the rule is any reconciliation measure has to have an effect on the federal budget. So will a parliamentarian look at it from Bernie Sanders' point of view and look at the budget? Will they kind of look at it from my view and other people's views? Will they take into consideration something else we didn't talk about that I believe we shared it on our social media, and maybe I'll talk about it another day depending on how things go. Will the parliamentarian take into consideration the CBO report? CBO is Congressional Budget Office, by the way. And that report essentially did not look very favorable on this federal minimum wage increase. Not at all. If anything, reading it would make you not want to take up the federal minimum wage. But I bring this up because the cold hard fact is this is no longer just a debate like, okay, will the parliamentarian do it? Like, it is now real life having an impact on the lives of the Americans or the American people, because in the event that the parliamentarian does not look favorable on this addition to the bill, the $15 federal minimum wage increase, what will happen without question is that the COVID relief that the American people so desperately need is going to be halted and come to this grinding halt, despite the gangster move that the Democrats and Biden pulled off with Georgia and all this good, juicy stuff that we've been talking about over the last few episodes. Or it may just be delayed, not completely halted, but instead of getting relief next month, people may not get relief until the summer. I'm not saying that's the case, but that may be the case since we're taking this bet. The Democrats took a bet on Georgia. They won that bet. Now they're taking a bet again with COVID relief. Are they a little bit too ambitious here? I'm not saying I'd be lying if I said I didn't disagree, because I've made it very clear. I quite frankly don't think that they should have, personally, this is Brittany's personal opinion, I don't think that they should have added the $15, despite how I feel about it, despite the fact that I think it is of the utmost of necessity for many Americans, and not just individual Americans, but families, communities, and the economy at large. I completely get it. But now is not the time. This is my personal opinion. So the question becomes, is COVID relief going to be delayed or halted? And I know we are going to have to wait and see. Even if the House votes this week, again, we've got to wait for it to be kicked back to the Senate. So we probably won't know until next week how this is going to go. So keep your eyes and ears open because this is some important stuff right now.